Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar. We will begin momentarily.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Pat Brady. I'm one of the co-founders of the Lincoln Forum as we go into our fourth year. Now, we'd first of all like to thank everyone for tuning in. Like I said, we're going into our fourth year of this. It's really been a great success, even with the challenges of COVID. We've learned that sometimes these webinar-based, web-based presentations get a big audience, and we're very grateful for everybody who tunes in. We'd also like to thank our corporate sponsor, Wintrust, our partners at Union League of Chicago, and Rivers Strategies. And we have a great panel today, and anybody that lives in or near the Chicago area understands what a big issue, probably the #1 issue in the city of Chicago, is crime. And so Tracy from Rivers put together, I think, a great panel of people that have been actively involved, elected officials: Alderman Brian Hopkins from the 2nd Ward, Anthony Beale from the 9th, Ray Lopez from the 15th, and Taliaferro from the 29th, all elected city council members on the front lines on this issue, and hosted by the finest political reporter in the world.
Oh my.
I'm kidding. Marianne Ahern from Channel 5 News. Take it away, Marianne. Thanks.
Hey, Pat. Thank you very much. If only my bosses thought the same, that would be fantastic. But we have such serious topics to talk about. And I feel like each Monday, we almost get sort of a war report of what has happened over the weekend. This particular Monday isn't quite as awful as it's been many of the weekends. But as we talk about Chicago's violence, and not just, oh my gosh, we all realize there's a problem, but let's talk solutions as well. But, you know, we're almost at 650 homicides this year. It isn't as bad as the very worst year of 1974 of 970, but every single one of those, of course, the toll that takes on a family and on a community. And what we're seeing this year, I think more than ever, at least we're feeling it in the community, is it is not limited to high crime areas. So let's start with that, Alderman. Let's start with why. Why is Chicago experiencing this kind of crime? And I think we should go to Alderman Taliaferro first as the chairman of the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Marianne, and as well as Pat for inviting me on the forum this afternoon. I'd like to thank my colleagues as well for participating in this. And Marianne, it is very difficult to pinpoint, in my opinion, why we have such a huge increase in crime, because I think there's a number of factors that play into the reason why we're having so many. All the way from, I mean, you can look at the pandemic, which is certainly not to blame in all, in full part, but the lack of jobs, the lack of resources. There's so many different facets as to why I think we're having an increase, to even include the lack of police officers. We do have a deteriorating, or I should say, a department that's suffering from attrition. And so there's so many factors, I think, that play into why we see such an increase in violence in the city of Chicago. But it's certainly been experienced across the country as well. But we're looking at Chicago specifically. And I can say there's a number of factors that will attribute to that.
Alderman Beale, you obviously have represented the South Side for many years. Do you think that folks are, because we see crime in the Fulton River District, or because we see it on Oak Street, that now all of a sudden everybody cares? You've been talking about this for a while.
Well, absolutely. I've been talking about it my entire career. And when you look at everything that's going on, it's really not too hard to figure out, because what's happening is when you send the message that, police can no longer chase, they can no longer pursue, and you're working the police, double time, canceling their days off. And what's happening now, the message has been sent that if you run from the police, you can get away. And so now what's happening is they're looking at certain communities where they used to say was 15 most violent communities in the city is now the entire city of Chicago, because now the people who create these heinous crimes, they're saying, if I'm not going to be chased, let me go to the affluent areas and get more bang for my buck. And that's what they're doing. That's why you're seeing them spread out and go into communities that ordinarily don't have any crime. Those, they're looking at that now, they have opportunity because the door is open, because they're not being chased, they're not being pursued, and we're just sending the wrong message.
Alderman Hopkins, do you agree? Is it about the message, and does that message come from the top? Where is all that messaging coming from?
Yeah, we could spend the entire forum just talking about this subject matter. There's no question about it. There's many factors involved. You know, Alderman Taliaferro is right. This is a national phenomena. But when you get down to the local level, what is driving some of these increases in, for example, carjacking, where carjacking has more than doubled in the last 2 years, a very disturbing trend. And as Alderman Beale suggests, there are certain neighborhoods, many of them in my ward, who historically never experienced the type of crime, the volume of crime, and the frightening violence associated with it that all of a sudden seems to have landed on their doorstep. And longtime residents especially are the ones that tell me, you know, I've lived here, I lived through the, you know, the bad old 90s, you know, when numbers were higher in the mid 90s. And they've never experienced anything like this. They've never felt anything like this, and they're legitimately frightened. And it has nothing to do with the data and the reports that we read as aldermen, and everything to do with the vibe that they feel in the neighborhood and the anecdotal stories that their neighbors are sharing with them. It is no exaggeration to say, from my perspective as the alderman representing those neighborhoods, this is a crisis. And it's something that we've never faced before. And if we don't resolve it, I really fear for the future of our city as a destination to live and work and raise your family.
Alderman Lopez, I know you have been quite outspoken in the past couple of years. Many would say you are one of the leading critics of Mayor Lightfoot. Is it because of Mayor Lightfoot? That's not necessarily fair, is it?
I'd say I'm one of two leading critics, with a nod to my colleague Alderman Beale as well. But let's stop mincing words. The increase is because there are no consequences in this city or county anymore. That started before Lori Lightfoot, but it has been amplified since between the Lightfoot-Fox duo that refuses to hold criminals accountable for their actions in our neighborhoods. We've seen that in our neighborhoods that have traditionally dealt with the violence on a daily basis. Now, as Alderman Beale pointed out, now they're moving on to other neighborhoods. They're going to other areas outside of their local home community because they know that if they go to Streeterville, if they go to Belmont-Cragen, if they go to Irving Park, they can get away with smash and grabs. They can get away with carjackings because even if we catch them, they'll be home before the officers will be. And that does start at the top. That is a leadership issue. And when you have someone in a position like Lori Lightfoot as mayor, who spends more time telling you how to report bad cops if your feelings have been hurt, as opposed to encouraging officers to do the right thing and to go out and arrest the bad guys, that's not a subconscious messaging. That's a very direct message that everyone hears loud and clear and takes it as their cue to go and spread the cancer of crime to all communities in the city of Chicago.
So,
Marion, if I could just interject and just make a quick
right,
quick
I wanted to come back to you.
You know, one thing that I've consistently harped on the last couple of weeks, and even before then, we have to look at solutions and stop looking at blame. I spent 23 years as a police officer, and I can tell you, we blamed the city council as well. We looked at the city council and looked at what the city council's position has always been against the police department. But I'm saying that we have to stop looking at the mayor, the state's attorneys, the aldermen, because we could certainly look at ourselves as well. We have not been completely supportive of our police officers. And our police officers, I can tell you without fail, they blame 50 aldermen as well for the position that they are in and the position that we're in. But I don't want to take this opportunity with such a large audience to sit here and point fingers at the city council, the mayor, the state's attorney, the judicial system. If we don't find solutions, if we don't find the right solution, we're going to keep dealing with this issue instead of pointing fingers. We can point fingers all day. We can point them out at ourselves as we should. But if we don't find the right solutions, we're going to deal with this over the next 5 or next 10 years, and it's only going to get worse. So please, when you ask me a question, ask me questions about what can we do as a solution, because I don't have time, especially when I'm seeing children 6 and 7 years old that are bloodied in our streets, to point fingers at the state's attorney or the mayor or their problems that they may have with one another, or this city council, or the chief justice or chief judge of our circuit court. Let's talk solutions during this broadcast.
Well, Mary Ann,
I would have to say, I think, let me just, I think all of those are parts of, you can hardly talk about violence without including that as part of the argument, though, Alderman. Is that what you were about to say, Alderman Lopez?
But actually, I was going to say, to my colleague's point, we should talk solutions, but you can't start talking about solutions without recognizing how we got to this point. You can't ignore the truth of where we're at moving forward.
We do know how we've gotten here.
So if we arrest people, for example, like the individuals that were running down the streets of back of the yards last night with an AK-47, if we arrest that person and there's no repercussions because of policies that are in place now by our leaders, nothing's going to change. And we can't ignore that. That's not a fact that we could just wash and push to the side because we don't want to address it. We have to take it in total. And I think if we're going to take things in total, then we have to do it from a place of truth.
I do agree with Alderman Lopez, but the same vehicle pursuit policy that we have on the Chicago Police Department is the same one that I operated on. We as officers and as supervisors, because I served as a supervisor as well, we are the weighted factors that are present before any officer to determine whether or not a policy or a vehicle pursuit should continue. That has not changed. The only thing that has changed is that same weighing of factors now go with a foot pursuit as well. So it's not a flat out policy that no one should either do a vehicle pursuit or foot pursuit. It's that they are to weigh factors that involve the current situation that an officer may be in. And that officer and his supervisor are to make a decision as to whether or not the facts outweigh one another to determine whether they should pursue.
So many are watching.
Become smarter policing.
All right, I want to interject this because we have lots of questions coming in, which is great and engaging. And one of them right at the top is, in what areas can the Chicago Police Department improve to more efficiently manage its work to fight crime? Who would like to take it?
I think what we need to do, we need to take the handcuffs off of the police. We've handcuffed the police into doing their jobs because they're now afraid of repercussions. They're afraid and they're tired, they're fatigued. And so we need to allow them to be able to do their job, and that is not being done. That's number one. And number two, we're down over 1,600 officers in our city of Chicago right now. When you look at the fact that we wiped out 614 positions last year out of our budget, and then now we're down over 1,000 according to our budget this year, and we have about 300 to 400 that are looking to retire. And I just found out that there's a couple of thousand that are of retirement age. And so we're dealing with a huge problem here in the city, but we need to get more officers in the academy. We need to double the size of our officers going through the academy. But the problem is now, because the police are being beat up on, the police are being the punching bag, nobody wants to be the police, and the police don't want to be the police. And so when I took the police exam some 20-something years ago, 26,000 people were on that list when I took the test. Now you can't get 2,000 people to sign up. And out of every 100, you may get 1 or 2 out of the pool. And so we're in a really dire problem here in the city of Chicago because of the climate that has been created.
Alderman Hopkins?
The answer to that question, what can the police department do right now to be more effective and to be better at their jobs? The answer is rising on the west side of Chicago right now in our colleague Emma Mitt's ward. It's a brand new state-of-the-art $95 million police and fire public safety training academy. And the way it's being built, the very construction of that building is part of the solution. They've hired traditionally underserved communities who have never had access to those good, high-paying jobs in the trades and the labor and construction. They're building the building. And when it's done, it'll have a Boys and Girls Club associated with it. It will have restaurants and other businesses run by minority business enterprises. And youth will be going there to see that there's more to law enforcement than what they've seen portrayed by the media and the negative attacks on police that have happened. That is part of the solution, bringing the community together with law enforcement. So maybe young people from challenged neighborhoods can possibly choose a career in law enforcement at an early age. We have a new cadet program that we're trying to use to attract young people to choose jobs in law enforcement, which right now, why would they want to when there's such a negative connotation with that job? We need to change that because we are the police. The police come from our own ranks of our friends and our neighbors, and our young people need to see that we value the police and it's a worthy career. And by the way, once you make the decision to go into that field, we are obligated as a city to make sure you have the most state-of-the-art training we possibly can give you. The science of law enforcement training has changed dramatically, and I'm sure Alderman Taliaferro would agree. When he went through the academy, what they taught him back then has evolved significantly, as it should, because society has changed. So we can't teach young men and women who want to choose careers as police officers all of the newest technology and all of the newest tools in that antiquated facility we have now. I'm very excited about the prospects for this new training academy for what it could mean when it comes online, hopefully next year. I'm told it's actually on time and on budget, this construction project. So we could be looking at a ribbon cutting ceremony sometime in 2022, and it could be transformative for the way we handle the science of law enforcement in Chicago. I hope for all our sakes that it's viewed as a positive thing. It wasn't when it was proposed. It did not pass unanimously. I think there were 8 or 9 no votes against it with our colleagues in the city council, and many argued vehemently against it. But I hope we can get on the same page because it's necessary, it's needed, and it's pointing the way to a future where police officers are no longer vilified and held apart from the community, but are welcomed and embraced as part of it.
Can I bring up this question that we've also received from one of you watching, which we so appreciate? Alderman Lopez, you're saying that the issues are State's Attorney Fox at the top, but according to this questioner, police arrest rate is atrocious. What are police doing to actually arrest criminals? I can look at violent crime in my ward today and see almost 0 arrests across the board. If what police are doing isn't working, what strategies should we be looking at to get arrests associated with the crimes up?
Well, thank you, Marianne, and thank you to the viewer for that question, because I think part of the issue that we have in many of our neighborhoods, including my own, is that we simply, as Alderman Beale said, do not have enough police officers available to do their jobs. This past weekend in the 9th district on the southwest side, only 55% of our district had beat coverage, which means there was only, in a beat, you'd have a car with 2 officers to respond to 911 calls. Only 55% of the beats had a car assigned to them, which means almost half the district had nobody assigned to them for when 911 call came in. No officers means no arrests. And all of this is because of many of the policies that Superintendent Brown has put in place since he's gotten here, particularly with all of these citywide teams. For example, the community safety team, which took from our local districts and made a 1,000-unit citywide team to kind of wolf pack and rove throughout the entire city of Chicago. That team should be disbanded. Our officers should be sent back to the districts they were assigned to so that we could have full beat integrity, so that we could have officers in cars to answer 911 calls, to make those arrests so that we could move forward. That is the #1 way we can start bringing safety back to our neighborhoods.
All right, we need to talk about, which will be the big question of the day today, is this vaccine mandate and police officers. I know it's not exactly violence, but if we might be seeing a lack of officers on the street, Alderman Taliaferro, what's going to happen? It did 50% only comply with the order? Do you have any insight yet? And if you don't, what are your thoughts even just should the officers comply or not?
I don't have any insight on the on how many officers have complied, nor how many are planning to take on. I've only heard through our FOP, a projected number. But Mary Ann, as I say again, I'm one that sat in the squad car within officers, with quite a few officers over a long career. And I will say this, I fully support the mandate. Why? Because if I'm going to ride in close proximity in a vehicle with an officer, it would be good to know that that officer has been vaccinated. Because ultimately what happens is either, I'm put in jeopardy or my family is put in jeopardy as well. And none of us are immune from death. None of us are immune from contracting this virus. Even this morning we see General Colin Powell has passed away from complications from this virus, and he too was fully vaccinated. So if I'm going to ride in close proximity or work at the desk in close proximity with another officer, that we have sworn to protect one another as well as we protect the city, it would be good to know that that person is vaccinated, because my family and my health becomes one that is at risk if I don't know. And there's so many other reasons to get this vaccination, whether it be by mandate or by personal choice. It's important that we can look at how we could help one another and save one another's lives. I've lost close family members. I've lost friends, and I'm tired of this death as a result of the vaccine when I know this virus has worked to some degree.
Mary Ann, I'm going to go out on a limb here, if I may.
We should note General Powell did have a pre-existing condition. It does not take away from the
many of our officers do as well. I mean, as a police officer, I'm telling you, as a police officer, and still today, I was diabetic, and I am diabetic. I had high blood pressure. I'm overweight. Right. I've had severe pneumonia to where I almost died from it. These are the conditions that many of our officers are faced with. So yes, pre-existing conditions exist among the police department as they do in everyday society. Now, I'm okay with putting my conditions out there. I don't mind. Absolutely. I'm just saying that if I'm going to ride in a car with any given officer, and that changes every night in some cases, why not know, or why not have some confidence to know that the officer that I'm working in this car with is vaccinated, or that officer that's going to walk in someone's house to handle a 911 call is vaccinated. We need those assurances because we are dying day in and day out as a result of this virus.
Right. I wanted to hear from the others as well. Alderman Hopkins, I thought you were trying to weigh in here.
Yeah, I'm going to actually go out on a limb and make a prediction here based on my personal experience with the police officers I've talked to. The compliance rate for our police officers in vaccination is significantly higher than what the FOP is trying to lead you to believe right now. That 50% number is going to turn out to be complete nonsense. I don't think it's anywhere near that. It's probably more like 20%. And a number of the officers that I've talked to who did not want to go onto the data portal to disclose their vaccination status, I've talked to several of them, they were all vaccinated. They weren't trying to avoid it because they weren't vaccinated. They just didn't like the way this was approached in the whole contentious atmosphere where, look, we all know the relationship between Mayor Lightfoot and the rank and file of the police department. It's bad, and it couldn't be worse. So they felt that this was yet one more condescending, insulting message that was delivered to them by someone who they do not respect or admire. And so it was an act of defiance, not necessarily just because of the controversy surrounding the vaccine, but the low morale in the rank and file and the way they're being treated. So they're resisting for that reason. And we heard
else
dire
that want to weigh in.
Okay.
Alderman Beale?
No, I totally agree with Alderman Hopkins, is that, the police are just feeling like they're just totally not being supported, and they're constantly the punching bag and we need to make sure that we support the police. We all support.
But do you agree with the vaccine mandate?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with the vaccine mandate. I believe everybody should get it. And I think that's the only way we're going to eradicate this virus. But at the same time, when people rebel, it's a reason why they rebel. And if I can just digress real quick, I wanted to respond to something that Alderman Lopez mentioned about, the crime in the 15 most violent communities. Crime was down over 33% in the Roseland community. That's one of the so-called 15 most violent communities, because we've created over 1,600 jobs, and all the public-private partnership of industry that I've brought into the area, we've put people to work. But because of the creation of this response team that the superintendent put together, he stripped us of our resources and totally dismantled all the hard work that we had put in place. And so now crime is on the rise because everything has been undone without any consultation from us out here about what's working out there. If you have something working in one community, find out what's working, find out why it's working. Don't just dismantle it and then you leave the community up for grabs, but then you send all the resources downtown. And when you look at downtown, it's still crime downtown, and crime is still escalating downtown. And they have 3 times as many resources as everybody in the communities because the superintendent has taken our resources from us.
Well, actually, one of our viewers today is asking for a show of hands. Who has confidence? Please raise your hand if you have confidence in Superintendent David Brown. Alderman Taliaferro, you are also the chairman of the Public Safety Committee. The others, I do not see hands up. So
I've asked for a resignation twice, so I think that speaks for itself.
Right. Alderman Taliaferro, why do you have confidence in David Brown?
Well, Marianne, I know how difficult it is to run that department. I know the difficult task of reducing crimes and the number of responsibilities that he has. From day one, I could say a lot of folks have not given, to include our officers, have not given him the due respect and the opportunity that he deserves to run the department. I believe that as every superintendent I've ever worked for, I want to give them an opportunity to implement their plans and their strategies, because I understand actually how difficult it is to run a department. It's easy to sit back from a leather chair in an aldermanic office and to say what a superintendent should do. But I would challenge my colleagues to offer suggestions as well. Many of them probably have, as I've done. I've offered suggestions to our superintendent on violence reduction strategies. Some of them he may or may not consider. But at the same time, I want to give him an opportunity to do so. From day one, a lot of folks in this city, to include a lot of police officers on a blog that I used to read, would say, we don't want this outsider coming in. That happens in every case where there is a outsider superintendent. You're not going to please everyone, but if you dislike what he's doing, offer suggestions, work with him, and try your very best to do that. And that's what I've been doing. So I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt.
You know, Alderman Taliaferro, go ahead. Who is trying to weigh in here first for a minute?
Alderman Beale.
Yes.
Well, I tried to give the superintendent the benefit of the doubt by presenting a very innovative, unique cop house, which is a pilot program in my community that is being funded by a corporation at no cost to the taxpayers. It was an innovative tool that is shown great success in Racine, Wisconsin, and I have a corporation that is funding it. The superintendent wrote a scathing letter in opposition of it. And, it was held in committee for over 2 years. And then the mayor wrote a letter against it. This was something at no cost to the taxpayers. Now, when we're talking about working with somebody, here I am trying to offer solutions, and they were working against it, something that has proven to work in these communities by reducing crime. And, so when you're trying to work with people that are opposed to your ideas, I don't think that's a recipe for leadership that needs to be.
Alderman Beale, I
commend
you for that. I do commend you for that. And I will say specifically, you have fought very hard to implement that cop house. And I know that you've had conversations with them. And that's one instance I can honestly say that you worked with him in trying to implement that particular strategy.
Alderman Lopez, go ahead quickly.
Marianne, just real quickly, I will say that when when he was still Chief Brown, calling from Dallas for his appointment, I was more than happy to take his phone call. And I supported his appointment. And I said that I need you to be an independent superintendent focused on your department and on our officers, making our neighborhood safer. In the 16 months since, he has been nothing more than an absent superintendent, living month to month in the city because he doesn't know when he's going to be fired, being the foil for the mayor to implement her own policies directly onto the police department. He is the most overpaid spokesperson that department has ever had. And nothing that he has put forward is trying to be in collaboration with us or for the betterment of this city. And I think that is where our issue is, and that is where we need to move forward from.
All right, also talking about moving forward, let's talk about what some of the tactics that the police are using. One of them is Shot Spotter. Certainly got lots of great press at the beginning. Mayor Rahm Emanuel was the one who first introduced the city to Shot Spotter. And for those that don't know, it is this technical tool that helps police hear and find out where these shots have been fired. They don't have to necessarily wait for someone to call in and say, oh my goodness, there's been a shooting. But it has been getting some criticism that it is not worth all that everyone has been spending on it. Whether it's ShotSpotter or any other kind of tool, you name it. I mean, you could put a different name on it. What are your thoughts? Alderman Hopkins, you first. Is ShotSpotter working and is it worth it?
Yes, and let me put it in the form of a question to an average resident of a neighborhood. If someone is firing a gun on the sidewalk in front of your house at 3 a.m., do you want the police to know about it? I think the answer is going to be yes. And then the next question would be, how soon do you want them to know about it? Immediately? 5 minutes? 10? 30 minutes? I mean, come on. This is a basic police tactic of responding to gunfire in a city. We've seen innocent pedestrians shot with crossfire in gang warfare. We've seen people inside their home have a bullet come crashing through the window and kill or injure someone while they're on their sofa. It's like the Wild West out there. Guns are everywhere and criminals are using them. I want the police to know immediately where it's happening. And this technology can triangulate and identify a location. It comes down to how you use it. We can have another conversation about how we effectively use technology. I think as a city, we're leaving a lot on the table. We can bring our police department into the 21st century with a lot of these new tools. Going back to my point about the new police training academy, a lot of that is going to be incorporated into the training curriculum, and ShotSpotter can only get better. If there's defects in it now, maybe it hears a motorcycle backfire and thinks it's a gun, that there's a dispute about how accurate it is. I think part of that dispute is being ginned up by the opponents. The reports I've seen suggest it's actually much more accurate than you're being led to believe through media accounts right now. But it's nothing more than a tool to help police officers respond to the epidemic of gunfire in our community right now. How you can be against that when children are being shot on the street blows my mind. You should not be arguing against one more tool that can help police officers potentially save the next life of an innocent victim who's going to get hit by a stray bullet. I'm fully in favor of ShotSpotter. It has gotten
some tough criticism, however, Alderman, I'm sorry to interrupt, from MacArthur Justice Foundation, even the Inspector General's office. So there are those who are very, very concerned that ShotSpotter has been perhaps manipulated even at some points. Anyone else?
Marianne,
yes,
if I may, Marianne, look at how many 911 calls don't lead to an arrest, and to say that ShotSpotter is faulty because that doesn't lead to arrest, it's mixing apples and oranges. This is just a technology that allows police to know accurately when something's going on, as Alderman Hopkins pointed out. And I just want to say something else. Our officers use a lot of technology on their person, and I remember not too long ago in City Council when people were demanding that we mandate body cameras on our officers. you know, it would, and the arguments were it's going to expose officers for how bad a job they do. And ACLU everyone wanted more cameras so that we could see the negative impact police have on our environment. And what it showed was officers do their job well and routinely every day of the week. So now the same people who wanted cameras no longer want it because it didn't prove their agenda. And we need to stop with the agendas because it's getting in the way of us and our ability to protect our residents. Too often, we hear nothing but narratives and agendas, such as the fact that technology, which doesn't see color, is somehow racist. We are so far off the scope when it comes to how we address things that we need to take a step back, recognize technology is universal, and move from there.
Mary, and I'll be very brief, I promise.
Yes.
I just, you know, Alderman Beale said it perfectly earlier. We are handcuffing our police, and we are. We moved from traditional policing in the mid-90s to community policing, and now we're moving toward technology-based policing. If policing doesn't change with time, then we'll be set back. And as Brian said earlier, we'll be doing reports with hammers and chisels from many, many years ago. ShotSpotter works. It's designed every weekend. I get an alert from my commanders informing me that they're responding to a ShotSpotter alert. And in many cases, there is a body on the street as a result of that gunfire. The technology worked, and I agree with Alderman Beale in saying that we have to stop handcuffing our police and allow them to get work done responsibly, of course, and not in violation of anyone's constitutional civil rights. But we can't handcuff our police and take technology away in an era where technology-based policing is very important.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions that we have received in the last couple of moments that basically are asking about what are some creative out-of-the-box programs that support underserved communities that have other more positive options. What are other cities? Have you heard of anything, any kind of other programs that places like New York or LA or who knows, Boston, somewhere that they might be using that the city of Chicago has not? And also let's work in there. What about this program, CRED? Our programs like CRED, anti-violence efforts are certainly many more than just CRED. But what are you hearing of a positive program that maybe Chicago ought to think about?
Right. If I can jump in.
Yes.
Well, actually, let me get back to the ShotSpotter. I'm a full support of ShotSpotter. But however, if we don't have adequate police when the ShotSpotter goes off, and then they respond because, well, they try to respond, and then if they see somebody fleeing, they can't chase them, they can't pursue them. So how are we going to get an arrest? So that's the problem that we're having. ShotSpotter works, but it's what happens after ShotSpotter where our police cannot pursue if they see somebody fleeing a particular area. Now, I love CRED. CRED is a wonderful program that's working out here in my area. And they were actually part of the reason why I had that 33% reduction in crime in my area, because they were working out here in the Roseland community, and we were implementing our programs alongside with CRED, working with the police, bringing those jobs in, bringing all those things. So that was the recipe that we had in place. And so now, again, all that has been disbanded, and now crime is increasing. Now, again, going back to my cop house, that is the only innovative solution that has been presented to the city council in the last 3 years about how we can combat crime. That is a proven track record as far as reducing crime. It has reduced crime in Racine, Wisconsin. Listen to this staggering number, 66% per capita. Racine, Wisconsin used to be the murder capital of the country, but since they've implemented, they have about 6 cop houses in Racine, Wisconsin. So this was a pilot program. This was an innovative tool that I tried to implement, and hopefully it'll be up and operational this spring, but it should have been something that the superintendent embraced from day one at no cost to the taxpayers, because it's totally fully funded by a corporation, one of the largest corporations in the country, SC Johnson. And if it works, then we can ask them to support another house in another community. like Alderman Taliaferro say he wants, maybe in Alderman Lopez's area, maybe even Alderman Hopkins. We can roll this thing out and bring our corporations in to be our partner to fund more of these houses that, you know, if it works. But
anyone else have another program that they
I want to just say one thing, Marianne, if I may. First off, I think if you want to actually end violence with a productive program, you have to do programs like READY, programs that actually take individuals who are trying to break that cycle of gang or drug life and do something more productive. And the city of Chicago has barely funded this program at about $1.8 million for 3 years, starting under Mayor Emanuel's administration, and hasn't really funded it the way it should. We need about $20 to $30 million to actually help individuals with subsidized wages to break out of this generational lifestyle. But I think the other thing that we also have to start looking at too, before we start looking at what programs work outside of the city, is where does all the money we spend go within the city? What metrics do we count for success before we start funding all these not-for-profit organizations that oftentimes have zero connection to a community, are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to interrupt violence and wind up doing more damage than good? We have to have an accounting of everything that we do to help offset the violence in our neighborhoods, because we are wasting millions of dollars annually by supporting organizations that end up working against our taxpayers' interest as opposed to making our communities better.
And Marianne, there's always a hope that I agree with Alderman Lopez on some issues, and I certainly agree with him on that. We have
shocking.
We have
We're up to 2.
We have violence interrupters that are out there on the street that are not receiving funding, and in the past we put the same dollars in the same people's hands without effective results. And I'll just leave it at that. I agree with Alderman Lopez and I agree with Alderman Beale. I'd love to have a cop house. In fact, it was my idea. I just called it a satellite office. But it was.
Don't try to take my credit. Don't try to take my credit.
Jokingly. But I love the concept.
You held it in committee if it was your idea.
I wanted to bring satellite offices under Mayor Emanuel, but they were turned down. Satellite police officers. My office is directly across the street from Oak Park. I literally sit directly across the street from an Oak Park satellite office, and I think it works tremendously. But I'll say this. There's some programs in answering that question. There's some programs that we have not tapped into yet. Programs like Alertizen that uses technology to alert citizens of crimes that are being committed in real time that we need to explore. There's other.
How is that, Alderman? Can I just interrupt? How is that different than I've heard? You know, next door neighbor. A lot of people are logged into that and get those alerts. Is it similar?
Well, those alerts are not real time though. Those alerts are coming out after they've been dispatched.
Okay.
I'm talking real time as a call comes in.
Okay.
But I love old programs that worked as well. When I was a police officer, Superintendent McCarthy implemented an Operation Impact Zone. It was very effective. I worked it. He identified probably 21 or 22 areas throughout the city that was high volume crime. He took police officers out of the cars and they walked the beats. We can return to a strategy like that because every one of those impact zones had a major reduction in shootings, every one of them. I worked 2 of them as supervisor, and neither one of those impact zones had shootings during the time the men were out there, the men and women were out there walking the streets. This was an effective strategy. There's no reason why we can't explore old strategies that worked. And I could say this about Superintendent McCarthy, and I know our current superintendent is somewhat under the same path. Superintendent McCarthy implemented violence reduction initiative after violent reduction initiative. If it didn't work, he got rid of it. If it worked, he kept it. Operation Impact Zone worked. Unfortunately, when he left the program, because it wasn't someone else's program, they got rid of it. And they got rid of an effective tool. We can look at old programs like Operation Impact Zone that I believe was being used in New York and re-implement those to reduce violence in the city.
Well, as a matter of fact, one of the viewers has asked today, what's with this federal strike force? We heard about that in the midsummer when crime was spiking. And it has that strike force that was going to really look at the laws. It wasn't necessarily more federal agents on the street. It was going to look at those gun laws and try to figure out how to make sure that those arrested were really held. It seemed in a way to try to bypass the Cook County State's Attorney. I'm not sure of that, but where any impact? What's going on with that strike force? Anyone know?
I think a strike force only works when you got bodies to back it up. Having a bunch of lawyers sitting in a conference room talking about what they could do next doesn't always help us. We need presence from the ATF and the FBI to go after those weapons in our streets. Sorry, Chris, I know you're a lawyer, but it's, but if we would have had a task force with bodies and lawyers to prosecute federally, that would have been better. But all we got was a 50% task force to grab the headline, in my opinion.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that before I move to the next? We have so many good questions. All right, let's talk about the business community, because we've heard recently, even from Ken Griffin of Citadel, who has said he might pick up his stakes and move out of the city. What about those concerns? What can the city do to make sure that investing in Chicago is important and stop from potentially leaving? Alderman Hopkins, as one of the downtown aldermen, you've got to be hearing a lot from people about this.
Yeah, you know, it's a constant concern to hold on to what we still have on Michigan Avenue in particular. You know, it's the remains of what was once, you know, a worldwide destination for shopping, and we're at about a 30% vacancy rate. And I'm told that every time a commercial broker gets a call from a potential tenant who might want to open up a new retail establishment, the first question is, what's going on with the crime? You know, they want to know, because they're seeing you know, massive commercial shoplifting rings that are operating. They're stealing tens of thousands of dollars of merchandise at the boutique stores on Oak Street at a time. And, you know, we have a state's attorney's office who does not place a high priority on prosecuting what's considered a nonviolent crime, retail theft, although increasingly we're seeing an element of violence associated with it. We've got security guards that have been shot and beaten. You know, people who are stealing are also violent, and they're carrying weapons. So it's a serious problem, and it's affecting downtown's reputation. We're looking at retail sales and the tax revenue that it generates increasing at a much faster rate in the suburban shopping malls as we're trying to get into a post-pandemic economy eventually. The suburban retailers are recovering much faster than the downtown retailers. And it's hard to prove what's causing that, but I think we all assume that the negative headlines every time there's a shooting in the Loop or some crime on Michigan Avenue, it's not helping. It's not helping our reputation, and it's not helping the business community that's already reeling, you know, from the effects of COVID. We need to step in and do two things. We need to give them financial assistance to get the lights back on in those empty storefronts. And we need to do our job, which is to arrest and prosecute criminals who are running rampant all over the Loop and the River North area. That needs to stop so we can start attracting businesses to relocate downtown once again, and hopefully the shoppers and the tourists won't be far behind.
Well, and we talked about this at the very beginning. Let's come back to it. I know, Alderman Taliaferro, you said let's not point fingers, but people are asking about State's Attorney Fox, and she, of course, has pushed for bail reform and other reforms, and perhaps that was at the time. Of course, you know, it ebbs and flows as far as what the public wants and desires. There have been some who feel as if perhaps the bail reform, it wasn't the right way to go, and how do you still have accountability? Do those released from jail have access to the resources once they do get out to stay out of trouble? You know, just letting everybody no more cash bail, or cash bail was said, hey, that's awful, but is that really working? Are these reforms the right way to go? I guess is the question I'm asking. Alderman.
I believe they are.
Oh, wait, Alderman Taliaferro.
I'm sorry, was that for me?
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
I spoke with a gentleman this weekend from an organization, ECCSC, Mr. Tyrone Muhammad, who made a very profound statement. We are releasing folks from jail, whether it's through bail reform or electronic monitoring or any other system, and we're not providing workforce opportunities for them. And so many of them will go back to a life of crime or whatever, or per se a life of crime. Look, we do have to provide opportunities for those that are coming out of jail and not just sit them there or release someone on electronic monitor and not actually monitor. I like the concept of releasing them and giving them resources. We're not doing it perfectly. We could do it better. But that takes us working together with the state's attorney's office and the city and the state to provide those resources necessary so that when someone comes out, you're just not leaving them high and dry, but you're pointing them in the right direction. That's the most important thing we could do, is point them in the right direction and say, here's an opportunity. It's up to you whether you take it. And hopefully they'll take it.
Marianne, there are some people who will take that opportunity.
Yes.
But we can't just blindly ignore the fact that there are criminals on our streets who we've allowed to be back on our streets, who have rap sheets that are 3 pages long, that are committed to a life of violence, no matter what program we offer them. They're not interested in programs. They're interested in settling scores, maintaining turf, and selling drugs and running guns.
And there's a place for them.
But I agree, there should be a place for them. But if we treat everyone under the same, if we view everyone under the same lens, we're going to continuously miss them. And we've missed them in my neighborhoods, we've missed them in your neighborhoods, and we've missed them in many neighborhoods throughout the entire city of Chicago. We can be compassionate, but we also have to be aware that there are some people who, no matter how compassionate we are, will never change.
Marianne, if I can add into that.
Yes.
You know, I've had numerous conversations with Kim Foxx, and you know, she has said over and over again that arrests are down so bad that she doesn't have anybody to charge. She said, so they're not making arrests for her to make charges on these criminals because, again, arrests are down. Now, let me get back to Ken Griffin, because you brought Ken Griffin up. When you have the richest man in Illinois saying, I'm going to pack up my business and leave and go to Florida if things don't change here in the city of Chicago. And then on the other side, you have David Axelrod saying the same thing, that we need to declare a state of emergency here in the city of Chicago. I've asked for the National Guards on numerous occasions because, you know, the police always want to twist it as when you bring in the National Guards, they're not trained to patrol the communities. I've never asked for them to patrol the community. But if you go downtown and you have an officer sitting on a corner, they're not patrolling either. It's just the presence. So bring the National Guard in, put them downtown to have the presence, and put those officers downtown back in the community to fight crime, and take the handcuffs off of them so they can fight crime like they're trained to do. So if you start doing these kind of things. We need to
kind of come back to and look at it this way. And I want each of you to weigh in, because I think it's been just really an interesting, great panel. Thank you so much. You know, I've had several people asking, why are we not talking about the root causes of violence? The intentional disinvestments of certain communities, particularly those Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, not funding the schools and all, and we could keep going on and on. But is the answer more policing? Let's as we each of you wrap this up, let's talk about that. We've talked a lot about that there aren't enough cops and people don't want to take the exam and their hands are tied and all of that. But what about those root causes? And let's starting with Alderman Hopkins.
Yeah, well, clearly, it's no mystery what the root causes are. The continued economic injustice that has plagued this society since the birth of America. You know, I mean, we all know that, you know, some communities don't get the advantages that other communities get. And young people who grow up in that environment, they don't have hope that it's all going to change for them when they, you know, hit the magic age of 16 or 18 or whatever it is. So they're not invested in preserving this society the same way children from advantaged communities are. That's it. How do we fix that? Well, you know, I'll just pass an ordinance tomorrow to change all of that, right? I mean, if I could, I know we all would. It's not quite that simple. But, you know, trying to address it, we're doing that all the time. This mayor, you know, I'm a critic of hers and when it's justified, but I fully support what she's trying to do right now, which is increase our public safety budget by $200 million. She's also putting $85 million into violence interruption programs targeted at youth to try and address those root causes in those neighborhoods. I gave you the example of the police training academy and having a boys and girls club right there next to it and having that synergy overlapping where we can try to intervene with young people at an early age. You know, we're doing what we can to fix the schools. That's a whole other issue, probably for another forum, but we're trying our best to address root causes. At the same time, the house is on fire. So it's probably not a good time to have a debate over maybe the next house will build it with fireproof material. When your house is on fire, you got to put it out. And we have a violent crisis right now. I'm not going to be able to walk out the door in the next carjacking, which, by the way, I had one on my block 2 days ago, and convene a seminar with the people holding guns to innocent people's heads and taking their valuables and threatening their life. I don't think we can have a conversation about root causes that's going to solve that immediate problem as it's unfolding before our very eyes. So it's definitely a part of this conversation. But when we talk about policing and someone wants to play the root causes card, I really think it's because they don't support law enforcement. They don't support our police. And they're trying to undermine the things that we're trying to do right now to respond to this immediate crisis where we're going to set a record, Marianne. You said it at the beginning of the segment. We're probably going to hit 800 homicides this year. 800 people murdered in the city of Chicago. That is unconscionable. We need to treat it like the crisis that it is while we're having the conversation about the social change and addressing the injustice that plagues us, so we won't have this same conversation 10 years from now.
Alderman Lopez, I know where you stand on more policing, but at the same time, there are those who worry that that's just not the only answer.
Well, first off, Marianne, it's not the only answer. It's got to be more than just police. It's got to be a lot more. And I think that as I'm listening to your question about root causes, most of what was ticked off, those, in my opinion, and hold on to your seats, I'm going to say something probably controversial. Those are more root excuses than they are causes. Because I think for me, what I've noticed is that just because you've been in a poor neighborhood doesn't automatically turn you into a criminal. I hate to tell that to people. You can be in a school that's missing resources and still become a good person. Where I find issue and where I think the biggest root causes impacting our city right now is that many of our families are failing. Our values are gone, and we're not imparting values like I grew up on, and like most of us on this call and watching grew up with. So that's why you see 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds pulling guns on each other or carjacking people or stomping people on Michigan Avenue or running around at 3 in the morning in Little Village. Our values are gone. And I think if we truly want to make a dent in what's going on, we can keep spending millions upon millions on all these other programs. But unless we start investing in our families and building stronger family values, nothing is going to change in this city. That is where the root of all of our issues comes from. What happens at that dinner table? What happens in that living room? And are our parents giving their children something to aspire to, or are they just letting them run around with no values, no empathy, and creating a generation of psychopaths?
Alderman Beale. I'd like to have Alderman Taliaferro at the end. We made you were at the beginning, but let's have Alderman Beale next, please.
Well, I totally agree that we have to come at it from a holistic approach. And that's what I think that I've been trying to do my entire career. When you look at the programs that I've created in the 9th Ward, all revolve around kids and my seniors. I'm a huge advocate for kids sports. That's why we've built the Pullman Community Center out here, where we have over 1,100 kids go through that facility every single week. And we've created jobs and opportunity. We're putting people to work. We know those things are recipes to reducing crime in the area. So we have to do that, as well as invest in our seniors, because our seniors are struggling because they don't have the resources. So we have to take care of the kids and the seniors, and then everyone in between will kind of work themselves out as far as what we need to do. Now, I agree with Alderman Lopez. A lot of this are social problems that we need to deal with. We need to go into the household and we need to make sure, but if you haven't been taught how to respect, how to, do the right thing, you have to have somebody to, go in and have some kind of intervention to, show people how to be a parent, show people how to cook a nice dinner. All these things go into play, and that goes back into the obesity in our community. So we have a whole list of ills in our area, but we have to attack not just one, but we have to attack them all at the same time, as well as reinvest in the police, in the community. We have to make sure we support them because we do need more police on the street and those violence interrupters. So it's not one solution, it's a host of solutions. We need to solve this problem.
All right, and the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, Alderman Taliaferro, you have the last word today.
I'll just say, I agree with my colleagues 100-fold. They hit the nail on the head and I support their positions. If I could just add to that though, just very briefly, and this goes back to Mr. Griffin. I have a lot of respect for the work and the efforts that he's had in the city here. And so I just want to issue a word of encouragement as it talks about the investment in our communities. Our Black and Brown communities has been disinvested in for decades. And now we are starting to see more investments on the west side and south side of Chicago. And we're going to need those investments, whether they be public or private or public-private together over the next several decades, well beyond this administration. And the reason I bring Mr. Griffin back up again, and anyone else that is considering leaving, these are experts at investment. And it's no different than investing in Bitcoin or Ethereum or stocks or mutual funds than investing in a community. You don't pull out when there's trouble. You stay in there for the long haul because you're staying in Chicago, just as you would Bitcoin that started off at $11 a coin. You're pulling out too soon can harm the community. So invest in Chicago, invest in us through thick and thin, when the times are great and when the times are bad. Be here to help continue to invest in the communities. And so I think when we pull out and when our business partners pull out of the city because of the violence, we lose, because now we have less and less and less amount of people that are willing to invest in that young man and that young woman that sees no other option but to murder. So I ask anyone that wants to invest in the city of Chicago to stay here for the good, to stay here for the bad. Marianne, I could have been back in Virginia a long time ago, but I'm invested in Chicago. My family is vested here. I love this city, and I'm going to continue to invest in this city as long as I can.
Thank you so much, all of you. I think it was a very interesting, it flew by. I was worried there weren't going to be enough questions. There were so many we didn't even get to. I apologize about that, but elections have consequences, and that is why I think it's just so interesting to have this debate and for all of you to be transparent and willing to take the questions. All four of you are people that I call on, and you do take my calls. And so I just, on a personal note, I have to say thank you for that. And of course, there's many, many voices in the city, but yours are very much appreciated today. Thank you to the Lincoln Forum. Thank you to all of you watching and listening. And may the debate continue, because that's, I believe, how we get to those solutions. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys.
Thank you.